Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Javad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Pakistan, the Prime Minister's aide on health says 500,000 doses of the Sinopharm coronavirus vaccine have arrived in the country and as many will reach on Thursday. Speaking to the media, Dr. Faisal Sultan said the country has opened registration to vaccinate people above 50 years of age. Meanwhile, Pfizer and BioNTech says their coronavirus vaccine is effective for children as young as 12. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.8 million lives, besides infecting over 128 million people. The Taliban have once again stressed the need for foreign troops to withdraw from Afghanistan by the agreed deadline of the 1st of May. A Taliban spokesman wrote this on Twitter after the Tuesday meeting between Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar and U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad in Doha. He said the Doha peace deal and the release of the remaining prisoners were discussed among other issues. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Pakistan and Tajikistan have agreed to tap unexplored areas in bilateral relations. He was addressing a joint press conference along with his Tajik counterpart as part of the visit to attend the Heart of Asia conference in Dushanbe. The two sides also agreed to reactivate joint working groups to boost bilateral cooperation in several domains. In Yemen, the army says it has killed a number of Houthi fighters in multiple attacks on rebel positions. The military says it has liberated many areas from Houthi control in the western province of Taiz and oil-rich Marib Governorate. And in football, Chelsea reached the Women's Champions League semi-finals as they beat Wolfsburg 5-1 on aggregate. They will face either Bayern Munich or Rosengard in the last four. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now to the news in detail. Brazil has reported the highest single-day deaths since the pandemic began, with more than 3,700 fatalities overnight. India has reported highest daily deaths from COVID-19 since mid-December, with 354 people dying in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.8 million lives and infected 128 million people. More in this report.
The socio-economic repercussions of COVID-19 pandemic keep mounting, laying the ground for aftershocks for years to come. A new report by the World Economic Forum says the pandemic has delayed gender parity by a generation. However, in a more promising development, a study shows that T cells, a critical component of the immune system, protect against the three most concerning new variants. As Brazil keeps logging new highs in cases, the president signed an executive order to disperse nearly $1 billion in new loans to fight the pandemic. Meanwhile, in Chile, a sharp rise in infections has put overwhelmed hospitals on high alert.
There has been an increase in demand, so there has been a need for a temporary space. The hospital has set up 2 trailers so as to increase capacity, and we have also approached cemeteries to allow for bodies to be received. This is being done so that what we're going through will not become a problem.
In Europe, Spain has passed a new law making masks mandatory in all public spaces, indoor or outdoor, until the end of the pandemic. Cases in Turkey and Greece have once again hit daily records as the countries push ahead with their inoculation drives. Germany has restricted the AstraZeneca vaccine for people under 60 years.
It is unquestionably a setback for our vaccination campaign that one of the vaccines available to us appears to pose a risk for a certain age group in this pandemic. Up until yesterday, there were 31 reported cases of thrombosis after being vaccinated with the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. Unfortunately, 9 of them are fatal.
Elsewhere, Australia has fallen 3.4 million doses short of its target of 4 million vaccinations by March 31st, prompting criticism of the government.
In Pakistan, the Prime Minister's aide on health says 500,000 doses of the Sinopharm coronavirus vaccine have arrived in the country and as many will reach on Thursday. Speaking to the media, Dr. Faisal Sultan said the country has opened registration for vaccination of people above 50 years of age. He confirmed that the first shipment of the 60,000 doses of the single-dose Chinese vaccine CONGO arrived in the country on Tuesday. He added that the country has so far administered over 800,000 doses of the coronavirus vaccines. Earlier, authorities said the country will buy a bulk of the Chinese CanSino vaccine to produce 3 million doses locally. Pakistan has been witnessing a sharp rise in the number of infections in recent weeks, prompting authorities to impose tough restrictions in some areas. The country has so far reported 14,434 deaths and nearly 668,000 infections since the first case was detected in February last year. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Pakistan and Tajikistan have agreed to tap unexplored areas in bilateral relations. He was addressing a joint press conference along with his Tajik counterpart as part of the visit to attend the Heart of Asia conference in Dushanbe. The two sides also agreed to reactivate joint working groups to boost bilateral cooperation in several domains. The foreign minister also called on Tajik President Imam Ali Rahman and congratulated him on his election victory. During the meeting, President Rahman expressed a strong resolve to further increase partnership between the two states. Qureshi invited the Tajik President and Foreign Minister to visit Pakistan. The Taliban have once again stressed the need for foreign troops to withdraw from Afghanistan by the agreed deadline of the 1st of May. A Taliban spokesman wrote this on Twitter after a Tuesday meeting between Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar and U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad in Doha. He said the Doha peace deal and the release of the remaining prisoners were discussed among other issues. Last week, U.S. President Joe Biden said it's hard to meet the deadline for the withdrawal of the troops. Responding, the Taliban warned of consequences if the U.S. breaches the deal. A UN-led conference on Afghanistan is expected to be held in Turkey soon that will involve all the stakeholders. But despite all of that, violence continues to rage in Afghanistan. Earlier today, a religious leader, a military commander, and 2 others were killed in a latest series of attacks across the country. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says Iran has seen no serious efforts from the United States to revive the talks on 2015 nuclear deal. In a televised cabinet speech, Rouhani said U.S. President Joe Biden has admitted to the failure of his predecessor's maximum pressure policy. He said Biden's administration has emphasized diplomacy. However, its words have not been translated into action. Rouhani added that restoring a nuclear deal will be very easy and requires no negotiations. He said Tehran will halt uranium enrichment within moments if Washington lifts sanctions. This comes amid reports that Washington has proposed a new offer to resolve a deadlock with the landmark 2015 nuclear deal. Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi has arrived in Riyadh on his first visit to Saudi Arabia since he took office in April. Media reports suggest that he is accompanied by a large delegation during his visit to the oil-rich kingdom. Ahead of his visit, al-Kadhimi tweeted that he was visiting Saudi Arabia to consolidate the distinguished relations between the two countries. He also said the visit was meant to foster regional cooperation. The Premier's visit comes upon an invitation by King Salman bin Abdulaziz last Thursday. Al-Kadhimi was scheduled to visit the kingdom last year, but the trip was postponed due to a health setback the king experienced. The Iraqi army says it has destroyed 2 ISIS hideouts in Al-Budor Isle. In a tweet, a defense ministry spokesperson said the troops also destroyed a boat and foiled a terrorist operation. He said the joint operation was monitored by the Iraqi Special Forces. Meanwhile, a spokesperson of the U.S. Operation Inherent Resolve said the forces are committed to upholding security. Colonel Wayne Maroto said the operation aims to stabilize conflict-affected areas. In Yemen, the army says it has killed a number of Houthi fighters in multiple attacks on rebel positions. The military says it has liberated many areas from the Houthi control in the western province of Taiz and oil-rich Marib Governorate. The military also claimed advancing after dealing heavy damage to rebels in the battle for the oil-rich Marib Governorate. Meanwhile, Houthis' attacks against the coalition forces continue as well. Earlier, Yemen's foreign ministry said rebels targeted refugee camps north of Marib with artillery and missile shells. The Marib offensive has escalated recently as the calls from international community ramped up to end the war in Yemen. The United States has called on international companies to consider cutting ties to enterprises that support Myanmar's military. At a news conference, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the military's action against its own civilians are reprehensible. The U.S. State Department also ordered its non-essential embassy staff to leave the country due to unrest. In Myanmar, the activists are holding more protests today despite the military crackdown. Meanwhile, fighting has flared between the army and insurgents in frontier regions, with refugees spilling over borders. More than 520 people have been killed in 2 months of protests against the February 1st coup. Russia says tensions are mounting in eastern Ukraine and fears Kiev's government forces can restart a conflict with the separatists. This comes a day after Ukraine's commander-in-chief accused Russia of a military buildup near their shared border. Speaking to the media, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Ukraine's provocative actions can lead to a civil war. Earlier, in a phone call with French and German leaders, Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of failing to honor its agreements. The two neighbors have blamed each other for a recent spate of violence in the region. Around 14,000 people have been killed in the conflict since it first erupted in 2014. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 23 people have been killed in fresh violence in the Rest Beni region of North Kivu. Local officials said the army killed 2 assailants in retaliations. The officials have blamed the ADF militia for the attack on a village in Beni. The ADF militia are Ugandan fighters who have made their base in eastern Congo since 1995. The militia has been blamed for the killings of hundreds of civilians over the past year in both North Kivu and South Kivu provinces. In Niger, the security forces have reportedly repelled an attempted coup after foiling an attack on the presidential palace. Witnesses say heavy gunfire was heard near the presidency for hours. It comes 2 days ahead of the swearing-in of the president-elect Mohamed Bazoum. Former President Mehman Osman, who lost in the runoff, has rejected the results, alleging fraud. Osman had called for peaceful marches across the country. However, authorities banned a planned opposition protest today in the capital, Niamey. In Mozambique, the Defense Ministry has deployed troops to the country's gas hub town of Palma in an effort to gain control of the area. This comes after ISIS claimed seizing control of Palma following days of fighting with the security forces. Speaking to the media, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff said they aim to wrest control of the area away from the ISIS. Tens of thousands of people are feared to have been displaced, with many scattered in dense forests. Meanwhile, Portugal says it will be sending troops to support Mozambique's army. Lisbon said it would deploy around 60 Special Forces troops to its former colony to train the country's armed forces. Earlier, the U.S. slammed the attack and vowed support for Mozambique in its fight against the terrorists. Egypt says it supports Sudan's call for an international quartet to mediate the trilateral crisis on the Nile Dam project. The Egyptian Minister of Water Resources stressed the need for sincere efforts for successive negotiations. He said Ethiopia's unilateral measures regarding the dam's construction will result in repercussions. Earlier, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also warned the dam will bring unimaginable instability for the whole region. Ethiopian dam's construction has heightened regional tensions, with downstream Egypt and Sudan pressing for a deal. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Pakistan's Prime Minister says a holistic approach is needed to tackle climate change. In his article published in The Times, Imran Khan said world's major economies should help countries like Pakistan that are doing their best to reduce emissions. He said Pakistan's climate change expenditure is hovering around 6% of the annual federal budget and is expected to rise further. The Prime Minister said Pakistan has been ranked as the 8th most vulnerable country on climate impacts. In Rawalpindi, the Ukrainian envoy called on Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa and hailed Pakistan's efforts for peace in the region, including Afghanistan. In a statement, the military's media wing said the two sides discussed matters of regional security and matters of mutual interest. It quoted the army as saying that Pakistan attaches great importance to ties with Ukraine in all domains. It added the two sides vow to expand bilateral defense ties. The International Military Exercise ACES-Me 2021 is underway at Mus'haf Air Base in Punjab Province. The air forces of the US and Saudi Arabia are participating in the drills along with Pakistan Air Force. In a tweet, the Saudi Defense Ministry said a number of its Air Force's Tornado combat aircraft are taking part in the exercise. Bahrain, Egypt and Jordanian air forces are attending the drill as observers. The exercise is scheduled to continue till April the 10th. It aims to provide an exchange of experiences and expertise in the field of planning and combat. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the US will speak out about human rights everywhere, including at home. He was presenting the State Department's first human rights report under President Joe Biden. The report criticized Iran, China, Russia and others for violent crackdowns, especially on opposition and minorities. The State Department said a large number of people continue to suffer under brutal conditions in 2020. It added the coronavirus pandemic also placed obstacles to human rights and fundamental freedoms. Blinken tried to dispel the notion that the report targets any country in particular.
Whether it's China, Russia, or anyone else, we're not standing against any of those countries. We're not trying to, for example, contain China or keep it down. What we are about is standing up for basic principles, basic rights, and a rules-based international order that has served us and countries around the world very, very well.
In the U.S., witnesses continue to testify on the second day of hearing in the George Floyd murder case that spawned the Black Lives Matter movement. They described how Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis policeman charged with Floyd's murder, was unmoved by their pleas. A Minneapolis firefighter told the courtroom she pleaded the police to allow her to give Floyd medical attention. She said because of her training, she instantly recognized that Floyd had an altered level of consciousness. The firefighter said she identified herself as a medic, but the police prevented her from giving chest compressions to Floyd. Earlier, the jurors also heard the teenager who recorded the video of Chauvin pinning the neck of Floyd. In Indonesia, a woman has been killed in gunfire at Jakarta's National Police Headquarters. Local media said the woman entered the compound with some other people and pointed a gun at police officers before being shot dead. Police have termed the incident as a terrorist attack. This comes days after two suicide bombers attacked a cathedral on Sulawesi Island, wounding 20 people. SpaceX has announced the final crew members of what they call the world's first all-civilian mission to space. The mission, dubbed Inspiration 4, will be commanded by 38-year-old billionaire philanthropist Jared Isaacman. Christopher Simbrowski and Dr. Sian Proctor will join previously announced crew member Haley Arsenault. SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket will launch the crew aboard a Dragon spacecraft later this year. The crew members will undergo commercial astronaut training by SpaceX. The mission is being targeted for the 15th of September from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It will be monitored by SpaceX Mission Control. China has launched a new Earth observation satellite from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. The satellite GUNFIRE 1202 was launched aboard a Long March 4C carrier rocket. The satellite will be used in land surveys and urban planning. It will determine and register land rights, road network design, crop yield estimates, and disaster prevention and relief. The latest launch was the 364th mission of the Long March rocket series. In Belgium, a chocolate maker is trying an unusual way to boost his business as the pandemic has kept foreign tourists away from Bruges city. More in this report.
On a spring day, the picturesque city of Bruges, crisscrossed with canals, is normally humming with foreign tourists. But plummeting visitor number has taken a toll on many of the shops in town. In such times, chocolate maker Dominic Persune has concocted spring specials ahead of Easter. He says the customer wants to go on an adventure when they are eating something. The former chef is particularly proud of his praline.
So we make a juice of grass, Granny Schmidt, and to put an extra acidity on it, we use the Japanese lime. It's yuzu. And the combination of those two, it's amazing. It's of course important to find the right balance between your chocolate, an origin chocolate, and then those flavors.
Persone says he believes chocolate contains a secret ingredient that has the power to counter the lockdown blues. Customers at his shop echo his sentiment.
What it brings, mostly extra fat, but also extra joy. And I think it's good during these times. Like now I'm gonna buy something for me and my girlfriend because with Corona we're not seeing much of our friends. It's very hard and that makes life a little bit better. So I would say chocolate makes life a bit better.
Belgium is trying to stem the third wave of COVID-19 infections, with most non-food shops open only by appointment. More than 22,000 people have died from the virus in the country, among the world's highest per capita fatality rates.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And now the business updates. The Indian rupee has weakened to its lowest level in a month. It comes as traders expect high demand for dollars due to the financial year end in India. The partially convertible rupee is now at 73.53 per dollar. The rupee advanced about 0.1% in March to 73.38 to a dollar. It barred most of the month's gains as State Bank rushed to buy dollars ahead of the fiscal year end. Experts predict more devaluation in Indian currency amid increasing inflation and continued central bank intervention. The Purchasing Managers Index for China's manufacturing has expanded to its highest level this year. The National Bureau of Statistics says the manufacturing PMI stood at 51.9% in March, up from 50.6% in February. The NBS data showed China's new export orders index rose 2.4% in March. Meanwhile, the imports index also soared to a new high in recent years as it reached a 51.1% mark. China's manufacturing sector has now remained in expansion territory for 13 straight months. This follows ramped-up production at factories nationwide, while upbeat export orders providing a further boost. The Wall Street stocks have edged higher as investors await the potential impact from President Joe Biden's infrastructure spending plan. A rebound in the tech stocks has lifted the Nasdaq Composite, which traded nearly 2% higher, while the shares of Apple, Amazon, Netflix and Facebook all traded up. The S&P 500 index also gained over 0.5%, but DJI traded marginally down. Meanwhile, the oil prices dropped as OPEC Plus showed concerns over slow demand recovery. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.